we've got successive Conservative governments who've been trashing our relations with our European partners and allies for years now. It's welcome that we're seeing the first Anglo-French summit since 2018, but there's a very, very long way to go.
So what is Labour's big plan to stop the small boats?
So our plan revolves around a number of key measures. Firstly, we've got to cancel the unworkable and unaffordable Rwanda Plan, and we would redirect that money into boosting our National Crime Agency and creating a cross-border police force that would work much more effectively with our continental European partners. Then it's really about bearing down on the backlog. The backlog is actually acting as a draw because those who come here on small boats know that they will go into limbo, go into the system and be there for on average 450 days. And so that has to get sorted. That means getting more senior caseworkers and decision makers into the Home Office, really boosting the productivity and boosting morale because the place is just very dysfunctional and demoralized. Then it's about returns, and we're hearing a lot about that today because that's absolutely crucial. Now, of course, we've got successive Conservative governments who've been trashing our relations with our European partners and allies for years now. It's welcome that we're seeing the first Anglo-French summit since 2018, but there's a very, very long way to go. And of course, the Dublin Convention was crucial. When we left the Dublin Convention in 2018, there were only 300 people crossing the channel in small boats. Last year it was 45,000. So Boris Johnson botched that, took us out without any plan B. So we've got to do that at EU level, and that's an absolutely crucial method. And then finally, it's about the authorized resettlement routes, and particularly Afghanistan, which is not working at all, which is frankly a disgrace. We owe a debt of honor and gratitude to those brave Afghans who stood up in Afghanistan against the Taliban, often working with British forces. So that scheme has to be made to work far more effectively, because now a lot of Afghans are crossing on small boats, which is precisely the opposite of what should be happening. So that's our 4-point plan. It is not about chasing headlines, throwing red meat to Tory backbenchers, governing by gimmick. It's about doing the hard yards, the quiet diplomacy, and the nitty-gritty work of government.
Well, let's pick through some of those policies that you have. Let's talk about returns, first of all, because it's been made very clear to us this morning that there really is no appetite from the French government to take any of the people who come across in small boats. And really, from their perspective, why would there be?
Well, in life, and particularly perhaps in dealing with the European Union, it's a negotiation, and negotiations are based on give and take. So we have to do a deal with the European Union, which is based on the United Kingdom doing its bit, taking its fair share. And in return for that, it has to be clear that those who arrive on small boats would be sent back. Now, as soon as you have a proper deal in place, which is comprehensive in that sense, you will completely destroy the business model of the people smugglers, because nobody's going to pay 5, 10,000, 15,000 pounds to a people smuggler to take a life-threatening journey across the channel if they know that the moment they set foot in the UK, if they do manage to get through the joint security patrols in the channel, that they would be sent back immediately. That almost overnight would destroy the business model. And that's why in 2018, there were only 300 people crossing the channel in small boats, and why last year there were 45,000. So the returns deal has to be done, but it's got to be a negotiation. You've got to put some skin in the game. You've got to have something on the table. And on that basis, the European Union will want to talk to us, because it's not in anybody's interests to have the people in misery on the coastline. And it's not in anybody's interest for these people smugglers to be making hundreds of millions of pounds trading in human misery.
The reality is, though, you might want a returns deal. But once again, the French are saying that they're not interested. We've heard this morning that the French have got their own problem with people arriving in France, with whether they're asylum seekers or economic migrants, as have many other European countries. I'm really interested to know what it is that a Labour government would offer France that would make them change their mind, because the messages that are coming out at the moment is categorically the French are not going to take returns.
Well, this is a negotiation, and people always start by playing hardball, if you like. The fundamental point here is that there are a lot of people transiting across the European Union with the intention of coming to the United Kingdom. So it's in everybody's interest to deal with that issue upstream. So before people get to the coastline and start trying to get on the small boats, to deal with it upstream, you have to put an offer on the table around what we will take as our fair share and have authorized a safe and legal way of coming based on processing asylum applications upstream. That's fundamentally the deal that has to be done. There has to be infrastructure in place to do that. There has to be an agreement on what the fair share is and what the numbers are. I have a view on that, but you don't go into a negotiation by putting all your cards face up on the table. So I'm sure you'll forgive me for not going into that in any further detail, but that is the reality of negotiating a returns deal. It has to be based on give and take, quid pro quo, and it means, first of all, rebuilding relations with our European partners and allies that the Conservatives have spent the last 5 or 6 years destroying.
You talk about tackling the backlog. What's the cost of that, and where's that money coming from?
So we know that the Rwanda plan is massively expensive. £140 million has already been given to Rwanda for, well, frankly, the square root of nothing. I mean, it's got to be the most expensive press release in history. £140 million there. And then, of course, the budget that's been allocated for each refugee that they would theoretically be sending to Rwanda puts that cost up a lot. So a lot of this would be about repurposing that money and help using that to boost the staffing in the Home Office, training in the Home Office, and dealing with the issue of retention, because one of the big problems there is that there's been such high turnover of staff and the downgrading of their seniority from higher executive officer to executive officer, which is a big salary cut, that they've found it impossible to hold on to the very good people who had the experience and the corporate memory to deal with the cases. And that's one of the reasons why productivity has dropped off a cliff.
But the money you're going to use, that 140 million from cancelling Rwanda policy, is going to, you said, fund a national crime agency, give more money to them, fund cross-border police force and tackle the backlog. And presumably some money is going to have to be paid to the EU if they're going to even be interested in taking returns. Is it going to go that far?
Well, the NCA and police force is from the Rwanda Plan. Part of repurposing the Rwanda Plan is for supporting the Home Office upgrade and rewiring that I talked about. But there's also, of course, the £7 million that we're currently spending on hotels. So this is a policy that pays for itself by investing in boosting the capacity in the Home Office. You improve productivity of asylum processing, you get people out of the hotels, and that is the saving that then balances the books. So it's a policy that pays for itself in that sense. You actually, in the end, you need a returns deal as well, because of course that will stop the new people coming in and increasing the backlog further. So all of this is about investing in order to save, investing in order to get the relations right with our European partners and allies. And in the end, that's the only way that we're going to reduce the small boats crossings to zero.
Stephen Kinnock, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
He is Shadow Immigration Minister. I mean, he's clear there that the crux of the Labour policy is the returns policy. But I did mention a couple of times that we've been told this morning, not least by the guest just before, Stephen Kinnock, who's the former Minister for European Affairs under President Macron, that if Rishi Sunak thinks he's going to go and get a deal on returns, he's going to be very disappointed, because that is not a priority or indeed on the table as far as the French are concerned. So you just wonder what Labour would do. Labour can say they want a returns policy all they like. I'm sure Rishi Sunak wants that too. But if the reality is it's not being offered, where does that get us?
Absolutely. Just to add to that, from the Times reporting on this morning, a diplomat's quoted, "Why would Macron take back Brexit Britain's returns or ask others to do so when other EU members like Italy are not following European rules? It will not happen. It is a pipe dream," said that diplomat. And there you go. That is the crux of this issue. Something else that Mr. Kinnock said there as well was around rebuilding EU relations. And I wonder actually if that is what is today is about, is trying to bridge that Brexit-induced gap, perhaps, and the difficulties of having several prime ministers in a short space of time. That actually, how do you build relations in 40 days?
Baby steps.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for watching. You get extra points for making it all the way to the end of the video.
And if you want to see more from me, Chloe and Callum, you can join us every Friday to Sunday on Times Radio from 6 a.m.